My head are unkind, giving power to thoughts I couldn't dare own as mine. Why am I not better? What if I fail? The longer the voices perceive my failures, the more forcefully I validate their existence. What if I'm alone forever, just not good enough? And then I wonder, how many others hear voices like mine? But never mind. It's time to wake up, brush my teeth, go to work. Time to come home and count followers as worth. Time to call friends and check in, all's the same. Time for good night, hoping tomorrow will change. Forgetting that it's always time for something, and yet there's never enough. So we gamify life for more likes and more stuff, unable to reconcile each passing year. Time's the one thing that we can't engineer. How might the tens of thousands of collective decisions made daily change if we were simply forced to come to terms with our own mortality? Would the voices in our heads stop their tirade? Or would we feel them grow frantic and become more afraid? Perhaps it's only when we stare in the face of a loved one who is dying that we realize we really only get one shot. That quarrels with lovers and battles at the workplace all seem to fade away as inconsistent and insignificant when seen in the frame of our limited existence. And that thinking small and doing small and loving small only makes sense under the false narrative that we will somehow live forever. But never mind. It's time. Time to place a few bets along this invisible thread and give pause to the voices inside my head.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Taryn Southern, and I'm a digital storyteller / singer-songwriter, and I've been making video content for a long time now, about 10 years, and I've made over 1,000 videos on YouTube. Now, I've always been a bit of a one-woman band, but recently I've enlisted the help of a creative collaborator on videos such as the one that you just saw here. And for most people, that's not an odd thing to have a creative collaborator. But of course, my situation gets a little more awkward once you find out that my new creative partner is not human. It's an AI algorithm. Although this one looks a little scary, so let's find one that's more friendly. Now, this is typically part of the conversation where I get a few raised eyebrows and arguments about robot overlords and the future of the human race, and we'll get to that. But today, I really want to share with you how working with AI has changed my creative process, and specifically songwriting, and why I think it will absolutely transform the music industry in really exciting ways. And then I'll perform a song off my album. But before we dive in, I just want to know here in the audience, who's a musician? Okay, so a decent number of you. Who of you work in tech? Great. And of the ones that work in tech, how many of you are already utilizing AI? Okay, so less. Okay, good. Gives me some context. I think it's really important that we all baseline the conversation with defining AI, because there are a lot of words thrown around about what AI is, and it can feel very complicated. But I think for the creative people in this room, or even entrepreneurs that are looking to AI, at its most basic, it's a computer that knows how to learn. And really, in terms of how it's relevant to you, is it's a tool. It's a creative tool, right? As a creative, you don't have to understand how a DSLR camera is made or why it works the way it works to be an awesome photographer. You just have to be able to play with it. So just keep that in mind as we go about this. So when I first started looking into AI for creative purposes, I'm a naturally curious person, and I had heard about some of the things that it was doing, and it was blowing my mind. So I did some research. I wanted to figure out how it was being used in the creative space. And so I'm just going to talk you through a few of those things. One is it's being used to predict hit songs on the radio, and with rather good accuracy. This was actually a study from the University of Antwerp. It's also been used to edit film trailers. It's been used to form new works of visual art that, in this case, were actually rated as more creative by humans than human-generated art. It's been used to write poems. This particular poem was the first poem that passed the Turing test. And of course, to compose music that offers dire warnings to humanity. This was the first headline that I stumbled upon exactly a year ago. I think it was a year ago to the day. There was a song that had come out through a company called Flow Machines that was based on Beatles pop. And I was immediately intrigued by it. And so I started playing around with all of the open source music platforms I could find in the AI space, which included Google Magenta, a company called Ampere, and a few others. And so I want to tell you a little bit about working with this software, because every time you work with a piece of AI software, it functions completely differently based on the engineers that have created it, right? But I will say that with all of the software I use, it requires a fair amount of human collaboration. You can't just press a button and make magic. So first up with Ampere, the process of creating music with a software like Ampere, which is very user-friendly, you start by inputting certain parameters around the music you want to make, like genre, BPM, tempo, key, and then from there, the algorithm spits something out at you. And you can decide whether or not you like what you hear, if you want to adjust it, if you want to change the key, if you want to change the tempo. You can do all of those things, rearrange the music, and then write vocal melodies and lyrics on top of that. So I'm going to give you a little example of the very first piece of music I created with Ampere. I wanted to make something that had a cinematic pop feel. So I took a soundtrack type of genre and mixed it with pop, and this was the first soundbite that I got from the tool. So it sounds a little bit like Lord of the Rings or something you would see in a cinematic movie, right? So I rearranged some of the music that had been given to me. I changed the key, something that would fit my vocals, and then I wrote vocal melody, lyrics, and here's the scratch track of that. So it sounds a little bit like Enya. But that was the very first piece of music that I wrote with Ampere, and it took me 1 hour to do that. Now, there are other programs out there like Google Magenta or IBM Watson. This here is some of the code that you will find in IBM Watson. It does require a bit more coding expertise, but you can get very granular about what you want to create. So you can get as specific as saying, you know, I want a trombone in section 1 of the song. I want the trombone to cut out in section 4 of the song. I want 9 layers of music in section 6. You can change all kinds of parameters that you can't do with some of the other programs, which is really, really exciting. And also, with programs like Magenta or Watson, you're exporting a MIDI file. Whereas with companies like Ampere or Juke Deck, you're actually getting finished instrumentation. And in other words, the instrumentation has already been produced, so you don't have a whole lot of choice in what you're working with there. But with a MIDI file, of course, you can import that into a DAW and then change the instrumentation as you see fit. So that's a bit of an oversimplified look of how I've worked with AI. But what I get really excited about is what I've learned from this process. So some of the lessons I've learned, we'll start with this one, enhanced pattern recognition. Let's call it pattern recognition awareness. AI neural networks learn by being fed an enormous amount of data, right? And the more data you feed it, the better it gets. And the more likely it is to mimic certain patterns, just like humans. So when I was a kid, I grew up on top 40 music. So it should come to no surprise that I tend to really like certain patterns that replicate pop music, chord structures, sounds, etc. And a lot of pop music producers would actually agree that there is some sort of formula to what they do. I mean, Max Martin, I think he's one of the most successful pop producers of all time. He's had so many hits on the radio. I like to think that he's just a walking artificial intelligence. He's really good at recognizing patterns that we all like in pop music. And so through this awareness that I've been able to cultivate by working with AI, I have a better sense of why I like certain chord structures, what kinds of instruments are enjoyable to me, and I've been able to actually harness my sound as an artist in a way that I don't think I would have done having not gone through this process. Another thing that I think AI offers everyone anywhere is really new and exciting collaboration. So just imagine being able to fuse your pattern recognition with Bach or with Beethoven. Like, what happens there? I just finished one of the songs on my album with an AI called Iva, which had learned to write music based on 1600s Baroque piano pieces. And it was a real challenge turning this into a pop song, but I did it. And I don't think that I would have had the same result had I tried to accomplish this perhaps with another producer, right? That had been taught pop. So that is really exciting to me. I feel that working with AI has been able to break me out of my own rules and my own assumptions, because while the AI does play by a set of rules, they're not my rules. And finally, the speed at which I can cycle through the creative process has been greatly enhanced by working with AI. So look, I don't have to drive 3 hours in LA traffic to go and collaborate with someone. My partner doesn't get tired or cranky. Those are some obvious advantages to working with AI. But even more importantly, I can make a piece of music from scratch, from my bedroom, without any music knowledge. And I think this is actually really interesting, because as a singer-songwriter for the past 10 years, I write with vocal melodies and lyrics, and I usually have to rely on a music producer or a musician to bring my vision to life. And that process sometimes works really, really well, and it's awesome, and other times it doesn't work so well. And so in this experiment with these tools, I can make anything that I want from my own brain without that sort of reliance. And I've become quicker and more confident in my ability to translate that. I also think that that's really exciting because it gives access to anyone, anywhere, to do the exact same thing. So this was the first album I ever made in high school. I was 17 years old. And it's amazing that I ever got it done. I think it took 2.5 years, and I had to bribe a bunch of kids from my band class with Blockbuster gift certificates. And we recorded it in a variety of garages. So the sound quality is not that great. But man, it was so hard. And I look at this album, and it reminds me how difficult the creative process is. And really, that the creative process is like 90% process and 10% creative. And that's the part where a lot of artists and even entrepreneurs get stuck, right? If the process gets too hard, you don't end up finishing your creation, and therefore you don't end up shipping it to the world. And that's never fun. And then I look at my friendly little AI tool here, and I think about how the kid in Sri Lanka or the kid in Nebraska or the kid in Central America who doesn't have access to formal music education or financial resources or collaborations that are beneficial to them, they now have this tool that allows them to actually create the music that they hear in their heads. And that is a super powerful entry point for self-expression. So it's in this way that I believe AI eliminates all barriers to entry and really levels the creative playing field in a way that I think could invoke the next creative renaissance. Now, I really wanted to do a creative experiment with you guys here today. I wanted to write a song live with you with AI. But sadly, I've been told by the AV team that this is not going to be possible. So if any of you are interested in just demoing this process, we could do it with Ibm Watson or Ampere. I will be available after this talk to walk you through we'll make a quick little song together. But I do want to talk about an important point before going into the performance, which is that a lot of people ask me, Taryn, are you worried that AI will one day be more creative than you and take your job? And I know what they're really thinking. What they're really asking is, are you worried about becoming irrelevant? And in today's media landscape, things are moving so quickly that relevance seems to be of utmost importance. But the reality is, humans always adapt. I mean, even in the case of Vine, right? Like half of the Vine stars are now the YouTube stars or Instagram stars of today. Artists always figure out how to adapt to new tools and make it work for them. So in some ways, it's the tools that become irrelevant, and it's humans that figure out how to make it work from them. So that's what's really, I think, exciting about AI. It gives us all an opportunity to work in this space. So I'd like to close by saying, the video that you guys saw at the beginning of this talk, Voices in My Head, it was created with, the music in that video was created with artificial intelligence, but the message of the video was entirely human and a deeply personal one at that. And I think, honestly, that's what people take away, right? I don't believe that anyone commented on the video I uploaded to YouTube and said, the AI part of the music just really ruined this for me. Our audiences, our listeners, they just want to be taken on a journey. They want to be told a good story. And whether that story was created with GarageBand or a guitar or AI, I don't think it really matters to them. And we're at this time in history now where people are really starving for great stories and a way to collaborate and cooperate and feel more empathy. And so as artists, we have this great opportunity to push those stories forward. And it's tools like AI that enable us to do so at greater scale and at greater access. And on that note, sorry, for some reason it's not working. There we go. On that note, I would love to share with you the debut song from my album, I Am AI. The music was composed entirely by artificial intelligence, lyrics and vocal melodies by me, and it's about a human who desires to break free from the limitations of biological existence.
I wish I could see beyond what I can see. I wish I could touch beyond what I can touch. I wish I could feel beyond what isn't real. I wish I could imagine, yeah. There's more to who we are. There's more to what we could be. As I feel the weight of being, I'm learning how to break free. I'm breaking free. I'm breaking down, breaking free. Wish I could hear beyond what I can hear. I wish I could taste beyond what I can taste. I wish I could sense beyond the present tense. I wish I could imagine, yeah. There's more to who we are. There's more to what we could be. As I feel the weight of being, I'm learning how to break free. I'm breaking free. I'm breaking down, breaking free. I've tried to walk a mile in someone else's mind, but underneath